Okay, so you're here because you want to learn a lot fast.
Yeah.
Like really dive deep into a topic without it taking forever.
Yeah, and without getting overwhelmed with just like random facts and figures. We want the good stuff.
That's what we do here on the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
And today we are tackling a book that a lot of people have been talking about. It's called Ikigai, The Japanese Secret to a Long and Happy Life.
By Hector Garcia and Francesc Miralles.
Right. And basically what we're going to try to do in this deep dive is pull out like the most important things that you can actually use in your own life.
Actionable stuff.
Yeah, actionable advice to improve your well-being, live longer, maybe even figure out like what you're supposed to be doing with your life.
Yeah, what's your purpose?
Right.
It's a big one. And this book kind of tackles all of that through the lens of this Japanese concept of Ikigai.
So I guess like a good place to start would be like, what exactly is Ikigai?
Well, the book kind of goes all over the place, but we'll try to give you like the Spark Notes version here.
Okay, a good overview.
Yeah, so basically it's about finding your reason for being. Like what gets you up in the morning, what makes you feel alive. And it's not necessarily tied to your job or anything like that. It can be anything that gives you a sense of purpose and joy.
Yeah, so that thing that makes you excited to be alive.
Right, and
Yeah.
that's different for everybody. The book doesn't try to give you like a specific answer. It's more about helping you figure out your own unique ikigai.
Right. Okay, so how do they actually do that in the book?
Well, one of the first things they talk about is actually this Japanese saying, hara hachibu. Have you heard of that?
I have, yeah. Isn't like something about only eating till you're 80% full?
Yeah, exactly. And this is something that's really common in Okinawa, which is this island in Japan where people tend to live a really long time.
Yeah, blue zones.
Right, one of the blue zones. And the idea is that when you eat until you're completely stuffed, you're putting a lot of stress on your body. It takes a ton of energy to digest all that food.
Oh, I see it.
And that can lead to wear and tear over time.
So it's like more about being mindful of how much you're eating and stopping before you get to that like overly full feeling.
Exactly. It's not about like measuring out your food or anything. It's more about listening to your body's signals and knowing when you've had enough.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. And that kind of ties into another thing the book talks about, which is the connection between having a healthy mind and a healthy body.
Yeah, mens sana in corpore sano. That's Latin for a sound mind and a sound body.
Right. So what do they say about that in the book? Like, how do you actually keep your mind sharp and engaged?
Well, they talk about how important it is to keep learning new things, like constantly challenging your brain even as you get older.
It's like taking classes or...
It could be that, yeah. But it could also be just like reading books, learning a new language, doing puzzle, anything that makes you think in new ways.
Okay.
And they actually quote this neuroscientist named Shlomo Bresnitz, who says that as we get older, we tend to stick to our routines, which is fine, but it doesn't really challenge our brains.
Yeah, you get stuck in that rut.
Right. And that's why it's so important to try new things, have new experiences, and basically keep your brain working.
Okay, so that makes sense.
And the book also mentions this other book called Maximum Brain Power, which talks about how mental training can actually improve your mood and your self-image.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And even just like simple things like playing games can help keep your mind sharp and prevent depression.
Oh, so like Wordle or Sudoku or something.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff like that. It doesn't have to be super complicated. The main thing is to just keep your brain engaged.
Right. Okay, I can definitely see how that's important. Now, the book also talks about stress and how to manage it, which is something that I think a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, stress is a huge problem for a lot of people.
Mhm.
And the book kind of explains the science behind it, like what actually happens in your body when you're stressed.
Right, like the fight or flight response.
Exactly. So basically, when you perceive a threat, your pituitary gland sends a signal to your adrenal gland, which releases adrenaline and cortisol. And those hormones prepare your body to either fight or run away from the threat. So like your heart rate speeds up, your breathing gets faster, your muscles tense up, all that stuff.
Right.
And that was really helpful for our ancestors, when they were facing actual physical dangers. But the problem is that nowadays we're constantly bombarded with these perceived threats.
Right, like emails and notifications and stuff like that.
Exactly. So our bodies are basically in this constant state of low-grade stress, which can have some serious negative effects on our health over time.
Yeah, it's not good for you to be stressed out all the time.
Right. And that's where mindfulness comes in.
Oh, mindfulness. That's another thing that I feel like I hear about a lot.
Yeah, it's become kind of a buzzword, but it's actually really helpful for managing stress.
Oh, okay.
So basically, mindfulness is about being present in the moment and paying attention to your thoughts and feelings without judgment.
So like not getting caught up in your thoughts and just like observing them?
Yep. Right. And the book talks about different techniques for cultivating mindfulness, like meditation, breathing exercises, yoga, things like that.
Okay.
And the goal is to basically train your mind to be more aware and less reactive to stress.
Right. So you can kind of choose how you respond instead of just like automatically freaking out.
Exactly. And the book also points out that a little bit of stress can actually be good for you. It's the chronic stress that's the problem.
Oh, interesting. So it's all about finding that balance.
Right.
Now, what about exercise? Does the book talk about that too?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They emphasize the importance of gentle movement and staying active throughout the day.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily about going to the gym and doing a crazy workout every day. It's more about incorporating movement into your everyday life.
So like taking the stairs instead of the elevator.
Exactly. Or
Yeah.
going for a walk on your lunch break or playing with your kids or pets.
Okay, okay.
Just little things to get your body moving and avoid being sedentary for too long.
Right, because sitting all day is definitely not good for you.
No, it's not. It can lead to all sorts of health problems.
Yeah. Now, the book also talks about anti-aging attitudes and how your mindset about aging can actually affect how you age.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
So they talk about how people who have a positive outlook on life and are good at managing their emotions tend to live longer.
Oh, so like if you're optimistic and resilient, you're more likely to live a long life.
Exactly. And they actually mentioned this study from Yeshiva University that found that those were two of the most common traits among centenarians.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and they tie this back to Viktor Frankl's ideas about finding meaning and purpose in life.
Right, logotherapy.
Yeah, so Frankl believed that having something to strive for, something that gives your life meaning, is essential for well-being, and that when people don't have that, they often try to fill the void with material possessions or fleeting pleasures, which ultimately don't bring lasting happiness.
Yeah, it's like you need to have a reason to get out of bed in the morning.
Right. And the book shares some really powerful stories about people who found meaning in their lives, even in the face of adversity.
Like what kind of stories?
Well, there's this one about an American diplomat who was really unhappy in his job, but everyone was telling him to just suck it up. But Frankl helped him realize that he actually had a deep desire for a different career path, and that was what was making him so miserable.
Oh, wow.
And then there's another story about a mother who was suicidal, but by imagining her own deathbed, she realized that her purpose was to take care of her paralyzed son.
Oh, wow, that's heavy.
Yeah, it's a really powerful story. And then there's another one about a doctor who lost his wife and was struggling with grief, but he found comfort in the fact that his survival had spared her from further suffering.
Oh, wow.
So all of these stories show how finding your purpose can give you the strength to overcome even the most difficult challenges.
Right. Now, the book also talks about some interesting Japanese ways of dealing with emotions and finding purpose, like Morita therapy and Niken meditation.
Yeah, those are two really fascinating approaches that are pretty different from Western therapy.
Okay.
So Morita therapy is all about accepting your feelings instead of trying to control them.
Okay.
Like the idea is that emotions are like the weather. You can't really change them, but you can change how you react to them.
Right. So it's about just acknowledging your feelings and then moving on.
Exactly. And it also emphasizes the importance of doing what needs to be done regardless of how you're feeling.
Okay.
And then Niken meditation is more about self-reflection and gratitude.
Okay. How does that work?
So you basically ask yourself 3 questions about a specific person in your life. What have I received from this person? What have I given to this person? And what troubles have I caused this person?
Oh, wow.
And it's a way to cultivate appreciation for the people in your life and to become more aware of your impact on others.
Oh, that's really cool. Now, another big theme in the book is this idea of flow.
Yeah, flow is a really important part of Ikigai.
Okay, so what exactly is flow?
So flow is that state of complete absorption in an activity where you lose track of time and you're just totally in the zone.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's like when you're so focused on something that everything else just fades away.
Right, like you're in your element.
Exactly. And researchers have found that people experience flow in very similar ways across cultures and ages.
Wow.
So it's like this universal human experience.
That's pretty cool. But how do you actually get into that state of flow?
Well, the book talks about a few conditions that need to be in place.
Okay, like what?
So first, you need to have a clear goal. Like you need to know what you're trying to achieve.
Okay.
And then the task needs to be challenging enough to keep you engaged, but not so difficult that you get frustrated.
Right. So it's like finding that sweet spot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you also need to be free from distractions. So like no phone, no email, no other people talking to you.
Oh, yeah. You got to be able to focus.
Right. And then when all of those conditions are met, you can enter the state of flow where you're completely immersed in the activity and you're performing at your best.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's a really great feeling. And the book actually compares the benefits of flow to the downsides of distraction.
Oh, that's interesting.
So when you're in flow, you're focused, present, you feel in control, time flies by, you're prepared, your mind is clear, it's enjoyable, and your ego fades away.
Wow, that's a lot of benefits.
But when you're distracted, you're unfocused, you're thinking about the past or the future, you're worried time drags on, you feel out of control, you're unprepared, you get stuck, you're plagued by doubts, it's boring, and you're constantly criticizing yourself.
Yeah, and that's definitely not a good state to be in.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
So it's really worth trying to cultivate flow in your life as much as possible.
Right. Now, the book also talks about how this idea of flow is really connected to Japanese culture.
Yeah, definitely. Like there's this word in Japanese, ganbaru, which means to persevere or to put in a lot of effort.
Right.
And that's a really important value in Japanese culture. Like they really believe in working hard and striving for excellence.
Yeah.
And they often do that by focusing on one thing at a time and really immersing themselves in the task at hand.
So, like, that's how they achieve that state of flow.
Right. And the book gives some really great examples of this, like the story about the makeup brush factories in Kumano.
Oh, yeah, that was a fascinating story.
So they went to this factory and they saw all these workers, each doing their own specific task with incredible focus and precision.
Yeah, it was like they were all in a state of flow.
Exactly. And then they asked about how the bristles were put into the brushes, and they were led to this small, quiet room where this master artisan was meticulously inserting each individual bristle by hand.
Wow.
And it was like this perfect example of flow in action.
Yeah, it was like he was totally one with the brush.
And the book also talks about how Steve Jobs was really inspired by Japanese artisans and their dedication to their craft.
Yeah, he was a big fan of simplicity and minimalism.
Right. And that's something that you see a lot in Japanese culture, this idea of sophisticated simplicity.
What do you mean by that?
So it's like this pursuit of simplicity that's achieved through deep understanding and mastery.
Okay, I see.
Like they're not just trying to make things simple for the sake of it. It's more about stripping away all the unnecessary elements to reveal the essence of the thing.
Right, so it's a very intentional kind of simplicity.
Exactly. And that can apply to anything from art to engineering to Zen philosophy.
Yeah.
And it's all about finding those meaningful challenges that keep you in a state of flow.
Right. Now, what about those everyday tasks that aren't necessarily super exciting or challenging? Can you still find flow in those?
Oh, yeah, definitely. The book calls it microflow.
Okay.
So it's like finding those little moments of flow throughout your day, even in the most mundane activities.
It's like doing the dishes or folding laundry.
Yeah, exactly. And the book gives this example of an elevator operator in Tokyo who was like super enthusiastic about her job. Yeah, and it was like she found a way to bring flow into this seemingly boring task.
Wow, that's impressive.
And the book suggests that incorporating little rituals into your daily routine can help you find more flow in those everyday activities.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Like maybe you light a candle or put on some music while you're doing the dishes.
Yeah.
Just something to make it a little more enjoyable and engaging.
Right, because it's not all about like those big grand passions. It's also about finding the joy in the little things.
Exactly.
Now, the book also shares some wisdom from centenarians, people who have lived to be over 100 years old.
Yeah, they interviewed a bunch of people from different blue zones around the world.
And what were some of the common threads that they found?
Well, a lot of them talked about the importance of staying active and having a positive outlook on life.
Yeah, we kind of talked about that earlier.
Right. But they also emphasized the importance of social connections and having a sense of purpose.
Yep.
Like a lot of them were still working or volunteering well into their 90s and even 100s.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, they weren't just sitting around waiting to die. They were still actively engaged in life.
Right.
And they had these really strong social networks and support systems.
Yeah, community is definitely important for longevity.
It is. And the book also talks about these Ikigai artists who are people who continue to pursue their passions well into old age.
Oh, yeah, like those people who are still painting or writing or whatever
Yeah.
in their 80s and 90s.
Exactly. And they're not doing it for the money or the fame. They're doing it because it brings them joy and fulfillment.
Right, they're following their Ikigai.
Exactly.
Now, one of the most fascinating parts of the book for me was the section about Okinawa, and specifically the village of Ogimi.
Yeah, Ogimi is like this little paradise where people live incredibly long and healthy lives.
Right, and they're one of those blue zones.
Yeah, and they have this really unique culture that emphasizes community social connections and a sense of purpose.
So, like, what are some of the things that they do differently in Ogimi?
Well, for one thing, they have these things called moai, which are basically social support groups that meet regularly,
Oh, interesting.
and they provide emotional and practical support to each other. Like if someone's sick or needs help with something, their moai will be there for them.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and they also have a really strong tradition of volunteer work and community involvement.
Okay.
So everyone feels like they're contributing to something bigger than themselves.
Right, and that gives them a sense of purpose.
Exactly. And they
Now,
also have a very active lifestyle. Like they're always gardening or walking or doing something to keep moving.
okay.
And they eat a really healthy diet that's rich in vegetables and fruits.
Right, so it's like a combination of lifestyle factors and this really strong sense of community.
Exactly. And the book shares this really heartwarming story about a birthday party for a bunch of residents who were in their 80s and 90s.
Oh,
And they were all like super energetic and happy. And it was just this really beautiful example of how to age gracefully and joyfully.
yeah, that's amazing. Now, the book also talks about some specific dietary habits that contribute to longevity.
Yeah, we already talked about hara hachibu, but they also emphasize the importance of eating a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables.
Okay.
And they recommend drinking green tea, which is full of antioxidants.
Yeah, green tea's really good for you.
It is. And they also suggest eating smaller portions and serving food on smaller plates.
Oh, that's a good trick,
Yeah, it helps you feel more satisfied without overeating.
right?
And they also provide this antioxidant canon for Westerners, which is basically a list of foods that are readily available in most Western countries and that are packed with antioxidants.
Oh, cool. So, like, what kind of foods are on the list?
So it includes things like berries, leafy green vegetables, tomatoes, olive oil, nuts, and seeds.
Okay.
Basically just a lot of healthy whole foods.
Yeah.
And then they also talk about the importance of gentle exercise.
Yeah.
So like we talked about earlier, it's not about doing strenuous workouts. It's more about incorporating movement into your everyday life. And they specifically recommend things like yoga qigong and shiatsu, which are all gentle forms of exercise that can help improve your balance, flexibility, and circulation.
Okay, those all sound good.
Yeah.
Now, another important topic that the book covers is resilience.
Yeah, resilience is essential for navigating the challenges of life and staying true to your Ikigai.
Right. So, how do you build resilience?
Well, the book talks about a few different approaches. One is through Buddhist philosophy, which emphasizes the importance of accepting the impermanent nature of life and not getting attached to things.
Okay.
And another is through Stoicism, which focuses on managing your emotions and focusing on what you can control.
Right. So, like, not letting your emotions get the best of you.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And they also talk about the importance of having a sense of humor and being able to laugh at yourself.
Yeah, that definitely helps.
And then they introduce this Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, which is about finding beauty in imperfection.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
So it's like appreciating the cracks in a teacup or the wrinkles on an old person's face.
Mm.
It's about seeing the beauty in the things that are often overlooked or considered flaws.
Right.
And that can be a really powerful way to build resilience because it helps you to let go of perfectionism and embrace the imperfections of life.
Yeah, I can see how that would be helpful. Now, the book goes even further and talks about this idea of anti-fragility.
Yeah, anti-fragility is like the next level of resilience.
I got what you mean.
So fragile things break when they're exposed to stress. Resilient things can withstand stress, but they don't necessarily get stronger from it.
Okay.
But anti-fragile things actually benefit from stress.
Oh, wow.
Like they get stronger when they're exposed to challenges or disruptions.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and the book gives some examples of how to build anti-fragility in your own life.
Like, what kind of things?
So one is to create redundancies.
Okay.
Like don't put all your eggs in one basket. Have multiple sources of income, multiple friendships, multiple interests.
Right. So if one thing fails, you have other things to fall back on.
Exactly. And then another is to bet conservatively and take small risks.
Okay.
So like invest a large portion of your savings in something low risk and then a small portion in something high risk, high reward.
Right. So you're not risking everything, but you're still open to potential growth.
Exactly. And then the third is to get rid of things that make you fragile.
Okay.
So like cut out unhealthy habits, toxic relationships, anything that's draining your energy or holding you back.
Right. So you're basically streamlining your life and making yourself more robust.
Exactly. And by doing those things, you can actually become stronger and more resilient in the face of adversity.
Yeah, that's a really empowering idea. Now, the book ends with an epilogue called Ikigai, The Art of Living, which features this Japanese calligrapher and poet named Mitsuo Aida.
Yeah, Mitsuo Aida was a great example of someone who lived a long and fulfilling life by following his Ikigai.
So what was his Ikigai?
Well, he was really passionate about calligraphy and haiku poetry,
Okay.
and he continued to practice his art well into his 90s. And the book shares some of his haikus, which are really beautiful and insightful.
Oh, can you share one with us?
Sure, here's one. In the here and now, the only thing in my life is your life.
Oh, wow. That's really powerful.
Yeah, and it really speaks to the importance of being present in the moment and appreciating the people in your life.
Right.
And then the epilogue also shares the 10 rules of Ikigai found in Ogimi Village, which is basically a list of tips for living a long and happy life.
Oh, what are some of the rules?
So they include things like staying active, don't retire, take it slow, don't fill your stomach, surround yourself with good friends, get in shape, smile, reconnect with nature, give thanks, live in the moment, and follow your Ikigai.
Okay, so basically all the things we've been talking about.
Exactly. And it's a really nice summary of the key principles of Ikigai.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Ikigai, what are a few key takeaways that you think will really stick with our listeners?
Well, I think the most important thing is that finding your Ikigai is not some grand mystical quest. It's about paying attention to the things that bring you joy and make you feel alive, and then finding ways to incorporate those things into your everyday life.
Right, so it's about being mindful and intentional about how you're spending your time.
Exactly. And it's also about taking care of yourself, both physically and mentally.
Yeah, so eating healthy, exercising, getting enough sleep, managing stress, all that good stuff.
Right. And then finally, it's about connecting with others and finding your community.
Yeah, because humans are social creatures and we need each other.
We do.
Yeah.
So if you can find those things that make you feel connected and supported, you're well on your way to finding your Ikigai.
Absolutely. And for our listeners out there, I encourage you to think about what really lights you up, what makes you feel passionate and engaged.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to explore different things and try new things until you find what truly resonates with you.
All right, because your Ikigai might not be something that you're immediately aware of. It might take some time and experimentation to discover it.
It might, but it's worth the effort.
It is. And here's a final thought for you to ponder. How might embracing the imperfections of life, both your own and the world around you, actually lead you to a deeper, more fulfilling sense of purpose?
Something to think about.
It is.